Thank you very much, Heather. And thank you to Carol and to everybody from the iSchool, to Kelly and to others for making me feel so welcome here. I'm just absolutely delighted to be here. And I'm going to inquire in a minute a little bit about who is in the audience and what your background is. But I thought you might be interested to know a little bit about me in as much as it connects with this place. I describe myself as a Canadian British American because I was actually born on Vancouver Island, just outside of Nanaimo, and lived there while I was a child. And as I grew up in the UK, I used to sort of think how amazing it would be to come back to UBC. I never actually managed it as a student, so it's really quite a lovely invitation. And thank you very much to invite me here as a speaker. One of the things that I am trying to do is to pitch my talk particularly to the iSchool, but of course everybody else is welcome. But I'm very interested to know who is in the audience. So if you're from the iSchool, could you put your hands up? This is quite a lot of you. Okay, wonderful. Okay, if you're from computer science, could you put your hands up? I work with a lot of computer scientists. I like computer scientists. That's great. Who hadn't I accounted for? Where are you from?
Psychology and human factors.
Psychology and human factors and? Yeah, great. So we've got quite a collection of people here. Okay, what I would like to do is to start off a little bit by introducing this topic of citizen science. And so to do that, one of the things I have some more questions for you. Is there anybody in the audience who actually contributes to citizen science projects? Okay, what do you do?
Reading labels and quality questions.
Right, okay. So just one person. Anybody in the audience who is an enthusiastic bird watcher or naturalist? Okay. Just a few. Okay, so let me start off a little bit by explaining what citizen science is. I've got interested in this topic because my first degree was in biology, and of course I'm in an information school. And the biologists and the scientists have been working in this topic area of citizen science for a long time. But those of us who work in the technology areas, of course, as with most other disciplines and stuff, we have, I think, something that we can contribute to making citizen science successful. And citizen science, as the name suggests, is a practice in which citizens work with professional scientists. And one of the things about citizen science is that, of course, there are many, many more citizens than there are scientists. So in these days of pollution, of climate change, of habitat loss and these kinds of things, we citizens have a pretty big role that we can play if we can contribute to the collection of data or the analysis of that data. So my first slides are going to be a little bit about the breadth of citizen science, and then I'm going to talk very briefly about 4 particular projects that I and my students have been involved in, because I was very happy with Heather's introduction because, of course, as a faculty member, one of the things that is most wonderful is working with really wonderful, terrific students. And so I'm going to talk about 4 of my students' projects, collaborative projects for all of us, and then draw some general conclusions. And I'm hoping that by the end of the talk, there'll be more citizen scientists, or would be citizen scientists in the audience. I'm feeling a bit stuck behind this desk, so I'm going to move around a bit because I'm naturally a person who moves around a bit. But if you can't hear me, please just put your hands up. So, okay, let me get started. So the very first slide gives you a kind of idea of the range of citizen science projects that are around. There are groups of people who go out and do what are called bioblitzes. They go out for a certain period of time and they have a task to collect data in a particular area. And there's some people on the seaside doing that. Others actually help to, like as in the Deepwater Horizon example, where we suffered a lot of pollution go out and record examples of pollution. Other people are collecting various other kinds of data. This is probably the most well-known and cited project. It's Galaxy Zoo. It was started at Oxford University, and they already have a huge collection of data from the Hubble telescope and elsewhere, and what they were interested in doing was getting citizens to work with that data. And they've identified such things as new stars and various other things. This one is also quite important. It comes from just across the water at the University of Washington, and it is a game to actually design and identify new protein structures. So there's a very big range of different kinds of citizen science types of projects. I was looking up to see what was happening at UBC. I didn't see anything directly in UBC, but you have wonderful group here, the biodiversity of UBC. So there's clearly quite a bit, I think, that's happening in this area. And this gives you a little image of just one or two of the various projects that are around the world. There are a huge number of citizen science projects all across the world. Now, when I'm talking about citizen science, I tend to be talking about projects that have probably been active for about the last 10 years or so, because those are the ones that are making use of technology in some way or other. But citizen science is a really old field. Audubon celebrated its 100th Christmas bird count just this last Christmas. And what people were doing is counting birds all across the US, and they have very carefully divided up the areas so that different teams go out to different places, and they count all the birds that they see on a particular day. Historically, I think this started with Teddy Roosevelt. My history is not great, but they used to go out with their guns and shoot all the birds and line them up and try and identify them. We don't do that anymore, so that's really good. And some of the birders are really some of the people at the forefront of citizen science. In England, the bird count has gone on for many, many years, possibly even older than 100, and I'm sure that you've got similar things going on in Canada as well. So citizen science is really old, and if you follow discussions in the natural history magazines or the birding magazines, you will very quickly come across a group called Cornell Laboratory for Ornithology, and they have huge, vast amounts of data. They have been doing citizen science under the leadership of a variety of people, but particularly Rick Bonney, looking at bird migrations, and they have some very sophisticated technology to help trace migrations, analyze data, do a variety of different things. So there's a whole group of people who've been working on this for many years, but it's only really in the last, I think, probably 6 to 10 years that probably those of us working in the technology area have got involved in this. I got my first, and I think I was probably one of the first NSF projects to get funded for a citizen science project, and that happened 4 years ago. So it's relatively recent that we're starting to use all the amazing technology that is available to us, from mobiles to drones, to crunching big data, to visualizing that data, to a whole range of things. And this is happening across the world, and it's happening for a variety of different reasons, partly to curate, and so that we know what's there, partly to make predictions about particularly the effects of climate change, and partly for activism. So for citizen science, there are one or two big issues, of course: biodiversity, and at the very beginning I had the Encyclopedia of Life symbol up there. We work with the Encyclopedia of Life. This, for those of you who are interested in sort of curation of data, just as in libraries, we have different ways of curating our data and of tagging it and labeling it, so too the biologists do. And the Encyclopedia of Life is a group that started 10 or 12 years ago It was a TED Talk by the famous evolutionist and botanist E.O. Wilson, and it was then funded by MacArthur for about 8 or 9 million. It continues to be a presence, and it's situated at the Natural History Museum in Washington. The aim of that group is to curate a single web page for every single organism in the world. And when they started, people estimated that there were probably 1 million to a couple of million organisms. This is excluding viruses, but they now count bacteria as well. But various scientists have talked about other kinds of projections, and people have predicted anything from 3 to 30 million species. And the importance of this is that as organisms are disappearing through climate change and the other things that I mentioned, is to have a record of what we have and where. So for those of you from the iSchool who are interested in library and data curation and data searches, that's a very important part of what's happening. There are very large numbers of data, mixed kinds of data, where people are taking pictures, sound recordings, sensor monitoring, these days using drones in some parts of Africa, over vast geographical and temporal areas. So it's really quite an interesting information challenge. In terms of species being threatened, this is from 2011 Wired magazine, and as you can see, the darker ones are critically endangered, the lighter yellow is endangered, and we have a number of, all of our main organism classes are endangered. The one that's interesting particularly is plants. A lot of people are not so interested in plants, but they're of course an absolutely fundamental part of the ecosystem. More recently, birds at risk. This is a report from the Audubon's Bird and Climate Change, reports that half of the 588 North American bird species studied are expected to lose 50% of their climatic range by 2080. And there's this nice statistic, or not nice statistic here, of that includes 50 species from BC. So even though you have many areas that are beautiful, open, not too populated, problems are even here. So, as I mentioned, one of my aims is to create a certain amount of activism as well as talking about the science of this. At the moment, species like this with big eyes that you can make into, soft toys and things, those are the ones that get the attention. Those are the ones that people demonstrate for and protect. But actually, it's all these poor, 99% of the others that are, hardly noticed at all, but they all form part of a very important ecosystem. So another issue, of course, is I mentioned addressing pollution, climate change, and data for monitoring. There's a lot of citizen science that gets involved in monitoring, and it's an effective grassroots activity as well as an really important scientific activity that often leads to, second steps of intervention through the EPA and other groups. Citizen science also addresses such things as public health. We can record a lot about our health patterns. There are many projects that are of significant personal value, and a lot of very clever ideas such as Fold It and others that I mentioned earlier. But my particular interest is really in the biodiversity area. Now, if you're an iSchool person, as I am, you've probably seen this sort of symbol, and this is why I chose my title, People, Information and Technology. And this is very much what we talk about, is what we do. And it's important in citizen science because there's public participation in science. There's an area of online communities that is highly, highly relevant. A lot of this is happening online, a lot in discussion groups and various online community groups. It involves collaboration. It involves collaboration with scientists. And as you can probably imagine, that isn't always straightforward. If you have spent 4 years at university doing a degree in biology, You've then done a postdoc of maybe another 4 years. You've then possibly taken another job, because there are not that many jobs, often scientific jobs in biology. And maybe you've even taken 2 postdocs. You know, you're probably going to be a little suspicious about citizens getting involved in collecting scientific data and the quality of that data. So working out ways to support collaboration between scientists and citizens is really important. It involves cyber infrastructure, it involves crowdsourcing, and a variety of other things. And citizen science sits really in this little area that crosses over between these different topics that, as information school people, we spend a lot of time thinking about, whether it's to do with libraries or whether it's to do with policies or digital curation, culture, cultural groups, a whole lot of things like that. So there are 2 really important topics for much of citizen science work, and you can break this down in various ways. But I think of these 2. There is community engagement and motivation. And not just short-term engagement, short-term motivation, but actually getting people in there for the long term to contribute. And, of course, data quality. How good is the data? And that's particularly important for encouraging collaboration with scientists. So I'm now going to go into the 4 projects that my students and I have been involved in, and I'm going to give you a very brief overview, and then if people are interested, I've put after each one some key findings, and I've also put some 1 or 2 publications, so that I know that this talk is being made available, and if people want to follow up afterwards, I don't expect you to jot down the publications, but they make a nice break between the different projects, so I'm going to leave them there. This was a PhD project. It was done by Dana Rotman, one of my PhD students, working with a group called the BioTracker Group. It was part of a much larger funded project by the National Science Foundation. It's the one I mentioned from 4 years ago. And Dana's work was to try and understand the fundamental issues of what motivates people to contribute, and, even more important than that, what motivates them to continue contributing. She took a broad sweep. She used 2 types of data collection methods, but surveys and interviews. And I'm going to focus, actually, what I'm going to be talking about as the interview study parts of this, which were analyzed using grounded theory, very bottom-up analysis. Part of her study involved looking at differences across the countries, but I'm actually going to give you the sort of combined results of these 3, because they give a good spread of the different kinds of reactions and the kinds of findings in a broad range of citizen science projects. So we chose 3 deliberately very different kinds of countries, deliberately different in their sort of structure. And the 2 that are really, I guess, the 2 that are really interesting are the US and India. To some extent, I've clustered together, although obviously the financial situation is very different in those 2 places. But they're both relatively individualistic countries on sort of definitions, and we can argue a little bit about Hofstede's framework. Elizabeth's smiling at me, and how useful that is. And we can talk a bit more about the culture, but also those 2 countries are largely individualistic. Costa Rica is extremely different. So she analyzed whatever numbers those add up to, about 45 interviews that were all collected, semi-structured interviews with a grounded theory approach to that analysis. And what she found was actually pretty interesting, and it distinguished quite a lot between longer-term participation. This was really foundational work. This was done almost 5 years ago now, and it was foundational work on which much of the rest of our work has been built on. And that, of course, is, you know, we work within the online communities literature, so we know about motivation and how long people stay in communities of different kinds, but we were particularly interested in these citizen science communities And the more I get involved with these kinds of community activities, the more I feel that actually you can't generalize too much across a huge range of different communities. Education communities are different, I believe, from citizen science communities, from health communities, from other communities. They have certain things in common. And a group of us was talking earlier and saying, you know, that the drop-off in many online communities is something like 90 up to 99% for first-time people coming into the community. In that sense, we find similar kinds of things here. It's pretty easy to get first-time participants. It is much more difficult to get them returning on the long term. But you'll remember that I talked about that one of the huge issues is data quality. And if you want good data quality, you need returning people, because there are various techniques that, training techniques for ensuring in these different projects how you can encourage your volunteers to collect quality data. So having long-term participation is really pretty important. Anyway, we found that most people come into this work in citizen science for personal interest. They're birders, they're interested in flowers, whatever. They're interested in pollution, a whole range of different things. Often it's for self-promotion. They want to either be recognized within their community or it helps them with their jobs. That was particularly significant in the group that we worked with in India. Or, you know, there is a large amount of social responsibility, which was particularly prevalent with the groups that we worked in within Costa Rica. And I think this is a project that is just waiting to be opened up and studied in more detail, because the historical difference between these countries is amazing. I mean, Costa Rica in the late 40s basically disbanded its army and directed its funds towards education, ecology, ecotourism, health, and these kinds of things. So they have a really strong national investment in ecology and citizen science. We found that long-term, what was really important and kept people coming back, there were some relationships that were within the particular citizen science project, within the community, and there were some that were broader. And the ones that were in the community involved very much trust, very similar to an online community, commonality of goals. We were talking earlier that there's no point in just having totally open tasks. You need goals, certainly in online communities, and citizen science is very similar. Feeling membership to a community, again, those of you who study online communities, this is really common foundational stuff that you'll remember from those studies. And the really big one for us was acknowledgement. Acknowledgement from the scientists was huge. And quite a lot of our work is sort of building on this aspect of what kind of acknowledgement we can give people. The external relationships, there were things like educational outreach, policy and activism were often very strong, again, particularly in Costa Rica. Important to note the factors that were demotivating. Time. If the data collection took huge amounts of time, that was really a problem. And of course, as we also know, but we sometimes overlook, having technology that works is really, really important. People get very, very frustrated and would rather than have an app or something that doesn't work, they would rather just collect their data in some other way. There was very strong relationships within the groups, but relationships between scientists and how much involvement scientists made was also really important. So just to summarize that particular study, most of the volunteers have self-regulated motivations. The continuing involvement really requires feedback, especially from scientists who sometimes lack time and interest in giving that feedback. Scientists may not trust the data that comes from citizen scientists, so data quality and building up trust is huge. Our volunteers often asked for open access to the data. They wanted to be able to use their own data, and they wanted opportunities beyond data collection and particularly attribution for their work. Lack of access to technology, poor performing technology were really significant demotivators in this study. And there are some suggested readings there. And then, yep, okay, I need to rush a bit more. I have another student who's looking at gamification. Who else is looking at gamification here? It's really, a lot of people are very interested in this. So we're developing a gamified app, and it's for flora caching. And if you do caching as an activity, then caching, we have a colleague from Northwestern, I'm just blanking on her name for the moment, but she is really into caching, and cachers who are really into it have little kits. They have they go out, and it's like a treasure hunt, and they get clues, which they get centrally presented to them on a caching website, and they go out and find these caches, and they leave notes or they leave gifts, and they take something themselves. So we took that idea, and we wanted to make it into flora caching. And flora caching, we're working with a big project called Project Budburst. And Project Budburst is concerned with phenology, and that's the study of how do things change over time. So with climate change, what a lot of botanists are interested in, and this particular group is interested in, is if you identify particular trees, lilacs, elms, maple trees, in a particular location, then what time of year did you see some of the first leaves, a certain percentage of the leaves? When did you see a certain percentage of the flowers? When did you see some of the first leaf fall? When did you see a certain percentage of the leaf fall? When had all the leaf fall gone? And people record these over, many, many years. So this Project Budburst does that. So our aim here was how could we get people more excited, and particularly millennials, in contributing. So this is an app that my student Ann Bowser is developing, and she's working, like many people, on badges. So you get a first found badge to encourage you. You get a badge for presenting the largest amount of data, and so on. So there's a variety of different badges. And she worked with a group of millennials, none of whom were really citizen scientists. These are students who were born in the 90s and 2000, and they're still on our campus, they're at university at the moment. She worked with 186 volunteers. Millennials were the students, 186 altogether, and then some regular citizen science volunteers. And she set them various tasks to find particular trees, to record particular data, these kinds of things. And she got some pretty interesting results. And the aim of this was basically to create a better app and better activities to work out what is needed to motivate these two different groups to contribute data. So the millennials wanted guidance. They wanted very specific guidance. And the app, what was interesting, had to fit very tightly into their everyday activities. They like challenge and they like competition. They like the gaming aspect. But the fitting into everyday activities was really important. The citizen scientists preferred the autonomy. They would integrate the app with their hobbies, but they really were interested in the scientific challenges and contributing useful data to science. So not particularly surprising, but I think the distinction between the two groups was pretty strong. Although there was some overlap, both groups liked the sense of a treasure hunt feel, so we've been able to build a bit on that. They enjoyed learning about the plants, but they had very different knowledge backgrounds, so we need to work on that. They viewed flora caching as a fun social activity. They naturally went around as groups. And they were interested, both groups were interested in the gamification, but particularly the millennial group. And so some of the key things that we found here was, age, experience, technology, interaction. Designers, of course, know all of these things, but we tend to sometimes forget them. Experience with the technology, but also their knowledge of the natural world. Structured tasks really benefited those with less expertise. Information needs of the knowledge to look up, those with more background had the knowledge to look up and find out a bit more about what they were actually tracking. Technology features such as leaderboards and badges were appealing, but this is where, again, we were talking an hour or so ago, we got pretty good prototype apps, but we really learned from this and also from a couple of other of our projects the real importance and expectations of having really well-programmed apps and a tabletop that I'm going to also talk about. You know, we are all so used to our iPhones, and we all have such really high expectations of technology that it's really useless doing testing stuff unless you can give people that similar kind of experience, because they're used to their Android phones, they're used to their iPhones, and particularly if you're dealing with millennials, the level of patience of being told, yes, you're contributing to something that will be developed and will have a better interface is very, very, they have a very short span indeed. So there again, there's a variety of publications that if you're interested in this project, you can look up. I'm going to race through this one pretty quickly because I want to get on to talking about the tabletop. But this was interesting. I'm really just going to give you the results on this because we all know that feedback, and that was one of the fundamental things I found out of the first set of work that we did, is really important. But there was really some really interesting work with Wikipedia by Bob Kraut and his student, whose surname is Zhu, I can't remember the first name, who found that slight differences in the kind of feedback had a pretty big impact. So we had a couple of different things that our students had to do, and these were like beginning potential citizen scientists. They had to collect data on a tree, and they had to collect data on a bird. And they had to collect the data both digitally and in paper form. As I say, I'm going to zoom through this. 70 students were involved, and the main thing that I want to focus on, there was a number of independent variables and dependent variables, and we were interested particularly in what motivated them. And we used a well-established motivation questionnaire for situational motivation, and that's the form of motivation that is most responsive to the activities that you're actually doing at any particular time. And we looked at various things like data quality and data quantity. And the really strong thing that we found was that polite guidance with appreciation is pretty effective for simple tasks, but it's nowhere near as effective as directive guidance. So giving a directive guidance, so by that kind of example, what I'm saying is this was really great, thank you for collecting this data, was like your simple form of guidance. A more complex form would be, this was really great, thank you for your contribution to the data. If you could find a bit more data on X or Y, had a much stronger effect, and it actually produced more positive engagement and actually more data as well. So what we found from this one was, again, need for feedback, but directive feedback encourages better performance, and particularly in later contributions, but also larger contributions as well. And this also pointed out for us, you know, it was just really tricky taking pictures of birds. And, you know, it points out that if you know that's the case, but people are really interested in that kind of data collection, then providing like bird dictionaries and these additional things that are going to help people through is really worth thinking about. So we're working on some extra publications for this. There'll be a longer publication, but there's one at the moment. And this is in some ways the one I particularly want to talk about. How much time have I got left? 20 minutes, okay, because I want to finish for questions. This is a project that is a more recent project. We've been working on this for the last 2 or 3 years, and it's a collaborative project with Mary Lou Maher's group at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and Tom Ye at the University of Colorado, Boulder. And we have 2 particular motivational questions that we're looking at here. One is to look at how this tabletop technology, a very large tabletop, I know some of you in the iSchool have got this, motivates people to contribute data. in the form of comments, or more often than not pictures, but also what we wanted to do was to really go a step deeper than just talking about participatory design and the various forms of participatory design. We actually wanted people to be involved in giving the design ideas and trying to track how, if you gave design ideas which influence the actual design of the tabletop and the app and the website, this sort of ecology of data, does that encourage people to provide more and better citizen science data. And actually this example is, I think, particularly interesting because it points out a number of things that I think are really difficult about doing this kind of work. We started off working a couple of years ago mostly with Android apps, Android phones, and we developed an app for that, for the Android. The Microsoft Pixel Sense tabletop, this is an early picture of part of the mock-up on that. And the tabletop sits in Aspen Center for Environmental Studies in Colorado, and it's right in the entrance, and people are invited as they walk through the entrance and into the nature park to take an Android app and some basic instructions for walking around the nature reserve. And you can see a little bit of the path here. This is actually shown on the tabletop, but it's also shown on the phone. And at various points, you are encouraged to take pictures of what you see, the organisms, the plants, anything really that interests you. And as you walk around all the stations around this nature park, it takes maybe half an hour, 40 minutes, depending on how long you want to spend doing it. The pictures are all automatically uploaded onto the tabletop, so that when you leave the nature reserve and you walk back through the entrance, it's in the entrance lobby, which is an educational center, and you can actually see both your pictures and everybody else's pictures. So we learned a lot of really fundamental things through doing this. We learned that, you know, 4 to 5 people is probably the maximum number that you can comfortably put around a tabletop for people to feel involved. We learned that it was really important to have the technology working very, very well, because when people have gone to the trouble to walk around, they are extremely disappointed, particularly kids, if their pictures haven't been uploaded and appear automatically on the tabletop. We also learned some other things that were really quite hard lessons to learn. This was one of the places where we learned that the quality of our design really mattered. The technology working really well really mattered, and the technology being robust enough for the job. We had to basically get rid of the Pixel Sense tabletops because they were way too light sensitive. So the touches, light would come through the windows, and that would be interpreted as touch on the tabletop. It caused absolute chaos with the work that we were doing. So we now have another tabletop design which is not light sensitive. But one of the things we also learned, which I thought was interesting for this was, you know, basically a kind of more focused, an HCI kind of interaction design type of team working with more of a technical design team. And there's a big question, I think, about, you know, what do you have to give people in terms of fundamental usability when you want to invite them to then help to develop the design themselves. And so where does the line get drawn on that? And in the early stages, we thought we just put up a very rudimentary system, and we invite people to say how they want to get it designed. And some of us were worried about that because we're brought up to do stakeholder analysis and spend a lot of time. It was fundamentally a disaster. We needed, you know, the technology to work very well and in a basic way. So where did we kind of draw a line? So we did another version where we had it much more developed. The usability was much more worked out. Of course, we then got less comments about the usability as a design idea. So what is a usability issue that needs sorted out versus a design idea was also part of our problem. But then, as we developed this more, and we got the usability really working pretty well, and we got the apps working well and everything, we found that people were really not very good at giving design ideas. And if you do kind of like stakeholder analysis and participatory design, you often learn this, and you also learn this the hard way. But as part of a research project where one of our questions was, if we give really deep involvement of our participants in the design of this technology, will that encourage them to contribute more and better data? We're really struggling with that because people don't really know what they can suggest as being an appropriate design idea. So we're going back, if you like, to some of the things that we knew in HCI in some of the earlier days. So we're now working on how do we give them the background so that they have the confidence to know the kind of design ideas that they might actually suggest without actually telling them what kind of design ideas they can give. And if we can do that, involving them deeply in the design outside of just doing prototyping and contextual design and participatory design, will that encourage more contribution of data? And that's sort of where we are with that. But let me point out a few things here. This is not a great slide. I should have got some others. But this is the virtual tabletop here, and these are some pictures and some comments and things. These are all, the way we designed this was so that everybody has a little icon, avatar, I don't think of these quite as avatars, they're more icons, but for each person so that they can identify their own contributions if they want to, and these are the design ideas at the side. So you can look at your own pictures, you can look at other pictures that are put up, and a variety of other things. And a lot of other things actually came to light as well, like when do you step in and clear the table of all the pictures because it's way too muddled, and things like that. So with this technology, there really is and I should point out, we've done a lot of our, I thought, background reading and background literature on this, but we still got quite a lot of surprises from it. We're getting a lot of people coming through who really love the technology. They like to take the pictures. They don't give us design ideas because we haven't been successful yet in giving them enough scaffolding to be able to help them to decide what design ideas, range of design ideas they might give. We're also finding that actually, if we want any kind of deeper involvement, even though this is out in a, it's not really in an educational setting. It kind of is in an educational setting. We have to scaffold the experience much more. So it's really turned into quite an educational project rather than the kind of project that we thought we were doing to start off with. So what we learned that visitors are really drawn to the tabletop. It's a huge magnet for them. Nobody really goes through that center without touching or looking at the tabletop. So it has huge power to pull people in. We learned that casual users really want to view their own photos rather than commenting. They want to see what they've taken and they want to see their own data. And that there is a huge role for really engaged stakeholders, that are naturalists and visitors who spent some guided time, extended time with the tabletop, really do provide extremely rich and very thoughtful content and design ideas, and are actually really, the naturalists are really essential in making this work with the general public. So the level of sort of naturalist involvement has turned out to be, we thought it was important, but it's turned out to be even more significant and much more important than we thought. So we're working at the moment on offering structured and guided scientific activities and challenges, which we believe are, the scaffolding. So we've got various fun things like find something, stump a naturalist, or, quite simple things, find 5 different kinds of slugs. They do various activities within this, and we're working on embedding our research much more within existing activities that are already going on. But the naturalists are absolutely fundamental in this, I think. And that we're also linking in one of the things that happens is that many of these people are visitors. They're passing through the center. So we're working on website designs so that when you leave the center, it is a community. You have the ability to continue to be involved. And particularly, if you've got to stump the naturalist, once you've gone away, you want to find out, what kind of comments the naturalists have come back with about your particular photo. So we're trying to get this ecology of websites, of the website, the app, and the tabletop working really well together. We've also learned an awful lot about how you cite this kind of technology, both from the light, and we had these wonderful ideas at the beginning about building shelters and putting it right out in the, it just is not robust enough for those kinds of things. And this is one of the examples where it really became very clear to us that, your technology has to be really well designed. People are just not patient with it, even if it's portrayed as, a prototype. I have actually, I was saying to the group earlier, I will actually not bid to NSF again for these kinds of projects without putting a request for funding in for a very professional programmer. I just think you have to have that kind of expertise. We've had really terrific, graduate students and undergraduate students, but I want to be working with ACE programmers and interaction designers. So on this one, we found that the visitors have extremely high expectations of the technology. They're just used to, they're used to their iPhones and a variety of digital devices, mobile digital devices. They have no patience with things that clearly are not up to those kinds of standards. They find it challenging to provide design ideas for improvement without knowing the kinds of things that might be appropriate for doing that. So we have to put more scaffolding in for that. The data types are interesting because they're including sound and pictures and a variety of commenting, but we really need to scaffold the experience for the visitors. And the technology, the large interactive touch-based displays are engaging for visitors. They have to be stable, they have to be robust, everything has to be fast and familiar. People are so used, particularly to their iPhones, that they expect this kind of technology, and particularly the apps, to work something like an iPhone. So there are a few papers that we have got published on that, but this is fairly early work. So just to draw everything together a little bit, just a few general conclusions. Easy to use, fast, in line with state-of-the-art UX, and capable of evolving. That's where the technology has to be, I think, for this sort of work. Designed in consultation with stakeholders. This is fundamental sort of HCI design, but trying to get a deeper take on that. And technology that's robust and rugged enough to, be used in the field. And scaffolding to provide, clear guidance for novices. So I also want to. This work is, as I mentioned before, it's supported by NSF. So I want to thank NSF for their three sets of funding they've given to us. It's being done at the University of Maryland. So I want to acknowledge my collaborators there. Collaborators at the Encyclopedia of Life, Brigham Young University, that's our little BioTracker symbol, and the NatureNet is the tabletop work that we're doing. So thank you very much for having me. I also just want to, I think Heather mentioned at the beginning our book, our interaction design book, and so I just wanted to also mention that one of the things I'm doing at the moment is slogging away on the fourth edition of this book, which will be out, I hope, for the next CHI. So I wanted to mention that. So if you happen to be using this book and you have feedback of things you liked or didn't like, I'll be here for a little while. It'd be interesting to know. There's still time to get some changes in. So thank you very much for having me, and I hope it was a quick run-through of the kinds of things we're doing. But I'd love to take some questions and hear about work that others are doing. I think Ben Ben's in the room, so probably shouldn't blatantly advertise so much.
We do have time for a few questions.
Tamara, it's going to be a hard one.
Well, it is, and it's one I've been struggling with myself. So I feel like there's this interesting question with participatory design about whether user involvement is a means or an end.
Right.
And so this question of, because what you said was, in the end of the day, there was this challenge where they didn't actually have that many design ideas.
Yeah.
And so what I wonder about is, what's the right path? Is it to try to engage users at the level of becoming designers themselves? Or is it to figure out how, as designers, to elicit enough about the requirements that you can do something incredibly engaging? Because I think so Disney Imagineering, they don't so much go for participatory design, they go for how do we, engage users so much that they spend lots and lots of money all day.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily make them participants in the design itself. And so I wonder about those threads of research, participatory versus, say, more human-centered.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting question. I mean, as you probably know, Maryland is, and here too, there's a lot of work with children and involving children deeply in the design as design partners, Alison Druin and some of that early work, and various developments of that. You could, I work pretty much only with adults or teens, and I don't know how well some of those immersive things that you can do with children would always work with older people, because one of the things that group does, and I know other groups do as well, is they get the kids for whole afternoons and things like that. So you're a little bit, I think, limited on this. This Mary Lou Maher from UNCC is particularly interested in design creativity. So this is kind of, can we get more creative designs by involving the users in that? So she's sort of after the, and one of, we have another, the eager actually is to try and get some measure of the creativity of the design ideas that we do manage to get from people. But first we have to try and get more design ideas. So your question is really interesting. One, and a sort of different piece to that, which I actually think is really interesting and really important, that again we were talking about earlier, and I know you guys are doing here, is I think the maker movement is one that is fantastically important and probably gets closer to your kind of Disney idea, actually, of really deep engagement, because it's very physical, and it's actually getting people to not just contribute ideas and be involved in the design, but actually to make some of their own mock-ups. So I think that is, and it goes beyond sticking sticky notes up and stuff like that. So I think that might be really helpful. I don't really know the answer to your question, but I think, we've always known that, when we started in HCI and interaction design doing storyboards, we knew that we had, that's 20 years or more ago, we knew that we had to give people something actually to look at, because we couldn't just get them to comment. And that was the whole beginning of the storyboard movement. And we've sort of gone deeper. But so I guess the question is there an even deeper level that you can get people designing for themselves? And I guess there's some of the programming. Randy Pausch and his students got into that kind of design by programming. I'm not very familiar with that that literature, actually. Kelly wants to make I'll just finish in a second, but I think it's, I don't know, I sort of look to the maker movement, and I think that what we're going to try and do is to give people more examples of design ideas that have been given by other people. We're actually, I forgot to say this actually, but our idea is to crowdsource these design ideas and to have a voting system that enables the crowd to vote on the level of design ideas. And so we will have the crowd voting, and then we will also have the design team voting. And then we will make a decision about which ideas to actually implement, depending on what we get from those two communities. Kelly, go ahead. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's a really tough and interesting one.
So this, I think, is related to that question. And I think part of what she asked was there seemed to be two aspects of involving the users. One was to get a design that was user appropriate, But what I also read in your slides was you were suggesting or possibly conjecturing that the participatory design is a way to get people involved in the citizen science. And for that side of it, I wonder, it seems to me one of the whole purposes of citizen science is that we need a whole lot more time from people than we can get from professional scientists.
That's right.
And so it's a very large-scale enterprise. And that seems to me that that second one is therefore either doomed to failure because the total number of people who can get involved in designing a system is limited for many, many reasons, not the least of which is at some point the system sort of shifts. And yeah, you can continue to refine it, but there's little point to that once you have a system that works. If your goal was to get tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people using it, so, if there is benefit to helping design the system to get people into the idea, do you think that possibly those have to be separated and maybe there has to be a whole other set of activities, which is the thing that leads you into doing citizen science, where you're going through the participatory design, but it's not actually for the system that's going to finally be used, because we just don't need that many designers, but we do need a lot more participatory citizen science.
Yeah. I don't totally agree with you, because I think by using a crowdsourcing mechanism, and I didn't explain this too well, but we'll have the website and the tabletops and the apps. You can bring a lot of design ideas in, and then you can do various voting mechanisms to have certain ones.
If everyone was alive today, within 10 years we'd have a pretty good system. What about the people who haven't even been born? We could do that, but do we need them? Or is it a gimmick?
You could say it's a gimmick, but badges are a gimmick. I mean, there are all kinds of things that are gimmicks. I mean, I think we're looking to see if we involve you in the way this thing is evolving, does that heighten your sense of ownership and your sense of wanting to make a contribution? That's really what we're looking at. And, from our point of view, does the design go on forever? No, probably. I guess as researchers, we haven't particularly thought through that one. Do we hope it goes on for several years? If it were successful, do we hope that such ideas might be taken and refined and put in a number of different nature parks across the country? Those are sort of where that idea is going. I do think with crowdsourcing, we can allow people to identify and also cluster similar ideas and then vote on which are to be the, if you like, the best as identified by the crowd. And then we can, and also in our case, we also want to have input from the expert designers, and then a certain number of those then get implemented.
I have one question here at the back, and then please.
I'll just stand up so you can see. So the point in here that's interesting to me, I guess, is maybe a general problem of having a very complex environment and trying to simplify it to the point where every citizen can participate in some way. But it seems to me that in the citizen science domain, one of the appeals of participating is that you become a scientist. So you're somehow part of that complex world. And so my first question, I guess, is that, did you find that that's one of the reasons that people are interested? They want to kind of play at science, to be connected to science. And if yes, how do you do that? How do you balance the extremely simple task with the sense of the bigger problem and the complexity?
Yeah. I think people definitely want a connection with science. I mean, I think they want a number of different things. But in that very first exploratory study that we did, people get drawn in because of their general interest. I'm interested in birds. I see that there is pollution. I live in a country that values ecotourism. I know that habitat is getting lost, all of those things. I want to contribute and be recognized as having some expertise. I may not be a scientist with 6 to 10 years of contribution, but I can contribute. And that's why, I said it very early on that actually one of the things that's really important to these groups is working actually with the scientists, and there are various projects where people are doing that to try and understand how we can work better with scientists to get scientists to recognize the contributions of citizens and give them feedback. I mean, we found again and again and again that people wanted connection with the scientists. And at one level it was, if they would just sort of say thank you, or they would just say thank you when they use this data in their article. Or some of them were, we'd really like to do more. What more can we do? And I mean, there are people also who will spend really a lot of time learning to contribute, learning to collect really good data. And they will, they will go on training courses for that, for water monitoring and a whole range of different things. So yeah, I mean, people want that kind of involvement. Some people wanted that involvement because it actually helped them professionally, to say that they were part of Project Budburst, or, as well as doing their other activities. Some of them just wanted it for, they got maybe, some scientific training, but they hadn't done any science for many years and they wanted to get back into it and contribute. Some of them did it for activism reasons and education. But I think that tie-in to I want to make a contribution to science is a really strong one, actually. And I want to be recognized. Somebody tell me that this is useful, that I'm not wasting my time, that this is contributing, in some way. And that's really, really getting that, understanding that and getting it right, I think is very, very important, because then you can start working on the data quality issue. Once you've got somebody pulled in to really want to contribute and do good work, then you can start working on and there's some pretty interesting ways that people are, checking data quality. So it's really important.
So we're almost at time, but we'll just have one last question here.
Thanks for the great talk. I have a question about the touch tables, and you're mentioning that obviously people are very drawn to them. We've seen that also too, but a little bit about the depth of that interaction, especially did you have any information on how long they play, or how, if they have repeat visits, they were still similarly attractive, or is it a sort of first encounter kind of issue where it's novelty and it's really cool to see you starting to do it, and then after the, is there enough depth there to explore?
We haven't looked at that in a huge amount of detail yet. The first attraction is huge. I mean, this the tabletop, it's on one side and you walk past it. There's a sort of arch and an education area that you walk past, and you walk into the reserve. So it's sitting there, and very few people manage to walk past it without either touching it or asking about it. If you're a kid, you just go up and touch it. If you're a grown-up, you find whoever's around and you say, "What's that?" And you might kind of try touching it. We've had, to be quite honest, in the first year we had a lot of technology problems. So we never got really a lot of understanding about people coming back, but people do want to see their data. We know that. So if the system works well enough and their data is there, and they want to discuss their data with other people. We're only just working on the website now. A lot of the people in the center that we work in are visitors, and so they've disappeared. They've come in for a week or 2 weeks, and then they've disappeared. The local people will come back and they will try it again. We want to give them more support on identification. For example, in one of the projects, people can't take pictures of birds easily. I mean, you have to have a decent camera and you have to be pretty proficient in using it. But people can notice things, they can identify, they can describe. So if you then have a dictionary of the local birds, and they can go and grab a picture of that and put it up as their sighting with their comment. It's things like that I think will keep people being drawn back. Birders particularly, but also others. It's something that we need to look at. I was talking to Eric, I think it was, earlier, in online communities, we expect probably 90% or more of the population who comes in once to disappear. And in some of the earlier projects, the very first one, where my student did the really in-depth interviewing, she found that a lot of people, about the same percentage, did not come back a second time. And I think we're seeing some of that, but I am optimistic that once we get the website up and we can support people's continual involvement after they've left the centre, that as well as some of the locals who come back pretty regularly and pick up the phones and wander around and collect data, and with more help from the naturalists, we've got some really excellent naturalists, we'll get that level of deeper involvement. I don't think we would get it without those things. I think that I've really come to believe that having the naturalists involved is absolutely essential. They just spark, the interest of groups. So they can just walk up and see a group standing around a table discussing something and give hints or give help or give additional information, that kind of thing. So I think it really is, it's people with a purposeful task and some good technology, and the people forms of the naturalists to work with the people coming through the centre, I think is pretty essential. Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. And thank you all for hosting. This will be hugely appreciated. Thank you.